So good morning, everybody. Good morning from Europe, from Copenhagen and from Bern. It's 8:30 in the morning, and I'm aware that the time is something different in different places in the world. This is a side event on SDG and data. SDG is so very important for NSIs, and what we are going to give you introductions to is how different NSIs have been working with SDG data coverage. We will do the presentations in the following order. First, we will hear from Malaysia, then from Canada, then from Denmark, then from Indonesia, and the last intervention will be by Mushini. And then each presentation is supposed to last around 10 minutes, and then there will be some time at the end. We have in total an hour. But there will be some time at the end if there are questions and comments from those who are listening into what we're doing this morning. So with no further ado, I will give the floor to Dr. Uzi from Malaysia presenting the Malaysian case. Please, Dr. Uzi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Neil. Good morning. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting Department of Statistics Malaysia to share the SDG, the indicators for Malaysia. For today, I would like to cover my presentation on 7 items on the SDG implementation in the country, and what kind of indicator that been released, and what the status, and of course, maybe the more interesting sharing experience is on what is the challenges and how the effort to reduce the data gap, as well how we can see that the pandemic, COVID-19 provided some kind of challenges, but we can also say that we can take it as also opportunity for all of us, where the importance of the statistic, it becoming more getting attention, and I would like also to say what about the moving forward in the context of SDG in Malaysia. This is the timeline.
Sorry, is there something wrong with the slides? What I see now is, actually I don't see any slides, and the slide I see is from Canada.
Oh, all right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, can I proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
On this slide, it shows how the overall implementation of SDG in the country, where in terms of the governance, the comprises of the National SDG Council, and also we have the National Steering Committee. I believe it's pretty similar across the countries. And the role of Department of Statistics Malaysia is the central agency as a focal point in the development of SDG indicators. These are some of the releases since 2018. The country has published 3 publications. One, the initial assessment of the SDG indicator for Malaysia for the year 2018. And we also have the SDG indicator Malaysia for 2018, and also the latest one on the SDG indicator Malaysia 2019. And we also developed a national SDG progress monitoring system, SDG dashboard, that consists of 128 indicators. In terms of the status of SDG in the country, the development of indicator for 2019 indicate a progress with 52% available indicator as compared to 41%. Top 3 highest available indicator by goal are goal 3, good health and well-being, 86%, goal 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, 83%, and goal 4, quality of education, 75%. On goal 3, good health and well-being, as I mentioned earlier, it showed the highest data availability for 2019. This actually with the great effort by our Ministry of Health that produce the Universal Health Coverage UHSC SDG publication. Bottom three available indicator by goal are goal 16, 26%, goal 11, 27%, and goal 12, 31%. In terms of challenges, number one, on the reporting to international agency. So data reporting to an international agency are carried out by line of ministry and agency, and sometimes Department of Statistics is not in the loop. So this is something that we are working, and we have engaged with several agencies to have the data coordination, where whatever the data that provided by the ministry agency to the international, they have need to also send it, report it to us. In terms of the data source availability, this is something that I think similar to the rest of the other country also. So we still depend on the traditional data sources, and has the result SDG data gap, especially for environment and agriculture, is still high. And in terms of the data harmonization and consistency, so this is something that work in progress, where we have to engage with different agency, ministry, and of course when we talk about the SDG, we need to have a very granular data at the more disaggregate at the small area geography. This is something that sometimes when the data at the national level, when we go to at the global level, somehow it's not really add up, because some of the district, they have a different way of the computation, be not really adhere to the national statistical system process. Maybe there are some issues on the concept of definition. So this is something that we really work very hard to the with the all the other government agencies, especially at the local area. In terms of effort to reduce the data gap, so currently the OSERV has initiated a number of efforts reduced to the SDG data gap. Number one, on the survey and census. So we conducting the National Household Connected Survey 2021. We cover 22 indicator, SDG indicator. And now, actually, we are still in the final stage to complete our population and housing census. Maybe some of you, maybe you check how many questions we put in the census form. We have 108 questions. So actually, most of these questions perhaps is very important with regard to the SDG, especially in the area of well-being and also environment and so forth. And about 8 SDG indicator also will be included in the upcoming economy census. So engagement with agency, data collection among agency also been carried out. And we also collaborate with the various local authority and also various civil society organizations, CSO. This about how the pandemic COVID-19, we see how we actually a wake-up call to everyone in terms how they see the importance of the to see the importance of the statistic. We know that COVID-19 bring a lot of disruption, job losses, reduction in the salary and wages, and also economic growth and investment. So with all this what happening, the people, the government, all the stakeholders, they really want to know what happening. So I think this is something that we see that is opportunity, and a lot of the expectation is put to the Department of Statistics, and the issue on the data sharing is really the thing that been discussed a lot, and this is what we call that the opportunity. So when we ask about the sharing the information from the other agency, is not really a issue at the moment, because they know that we need more timely and real data. So this will increase the awareness of the better statistic. And of course, moving forward, the country need to have really clear policy. We have to do the stock taking, what happening, and how we can really plan and impact in the country. We just launched the latest 5 years development plan of the country. So a lot of the target we have to monitor and have to really measure on the very precisely on the annual and also monthly and as well the quarterly basis. Moving forward, these are some of the area that we are focused in, especially in the environment, waste, safety, and agriculture indicator. And in Malaysia, actually, we are blessing actually with a very good land to cultivate, to produce the agriculture. But at the moment, we see that we need to improve the indicator, how we can transform the agriculture sector to modern farming, and at the same time we can reduce over dependent on the import of the agriculture product from the rest of the world, and also to create job opportunity for youth and our local labor. And of course, we also now work to strengthen the use of Gs and the big data to increase the data availability, and also we strengthen engagement with related strategy partners like Malaysian Space Agency. We see that the potential to use the satellite images to measure the SDG 15.11. And also very important to bring the statistic and also the speed of SDG kind of the bottom up. So we need to have the kind of feeling that when we announce about the statistic or the number, the people at the last can have the ownership on the data instead of looking at only at the state or at national level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uzi. I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself when you do your presentation. Dr. Uzi is the Director General of Statistics Malaysia. And now we move on to Cara Williams from Statistics Canada. Cara, please, the floor is yours. Just a short introduction and then the presentation.
Thank you, Nils. Cara Williams from Statistics Canada, and I lead the SDG unit for Statistics Canada, and I am Canada's IEAG member. So if I see the slides are up there. So good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be with you virtually in Bern, albeit from my home in Ottawa. It is now 2:45 in the morning here. So if I sound a bit hoarse, it is because just shortly, a few minutes ago, really, I was sound asleep. Before I start, I want to thank colleagues from Statistics Denmark for their work on this session. So let's begin. Next slide, please. I want to give you a quick overview of what I'll speak about today. So if I veer off, again, it's the middle of the night and I may be even less coherent than usual. And I would ask our lovely moderator Nils to put me back on track. I'm going to start with a brief overview of Statistics Canada's role with respect to the SDGs for the Government of Canada. I'll then speak about the development of the Canadian indicator framework for the SDGs in terms of the process that we used and with respect to developing Canada's specific SDG indicators, the opportunities, and of course, the challenges that we faced. And finally, I'll end the presentation with next steps, how we are moving forward to provide more data disaggregation, how we are developing progress measures. So we can go to the next slide, please. In Canada, like in many other countries, Statistics Canada is the data focal point for SDGs. So what that means in practice is that StatCan collects, compiles, and reports on the global indicators to the UN. We also report to Canadians on our SDG portal. We released the GIF on our SDG data hub in May 2018, where we have put the statistics for the global indicators along with some proxy measures. It is a tabular-based product at present, and we are currently moving to the open SDG platform, which will allow for easy data visualization. Every year, we examine data sources, and we are able to publish more and more data. We also continue to add further data disaggregation every year. But like this case in most countries, and for most national statistics offices, publishing comprehensive data disaggregation at the lowest levels is a challenge. We've also released some data visualizations for the SDGs. This was in the form of fact sheets. These fact sheets included community spotlights, which highlighted some of the actions taken by civil society in Canada to help achieve the goals, as we all know that the government acting alone is not sufficient. And we hope to update our fact sheets again in 2022. Finally, we come to our most recent work, which is related to the development of the Canadian Indicator Framework. We call this the CIF. In June of this year, we released the CIF using the Open SDG platform. That's a separate platform than we use for reporting on the global indicators. And I'll speak now more specifically on the development of this framework. Next slide, please. In the summary for this session, it noted that in the resolution Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, that national implementation of the 2030 Agenda could be followed with national targets and indicators for the SDG. So this is a bit of a timeline for our domestic implementation. In 2018, the Government of Canada noted that Canada would develop a national strategy for the SDGs. Statistics Canada was then given the formal mandate to develop the Canada-specific SDG indicators that would support and report on the strategy. This was in addition to the role StatCan has for monitoring the global indicators for Canada. And in May 2018, as I mentioned, we released our first SDG hub, our reporting on the GIF. And we update this every year. And in February, the national strategy was released by the Government of Canada. And later this spring, last spring, so June, we released the SIF. Next slide, please. So what was the process for this? Way back in 2018, when the Government of Canada undertook wide consultations with stakeholders, the ambitions were developed, and this was released in 2019, along with a preliminary indicator framework. We call this document the Towards a National Strategy, and this was a bottom-up approach. In 2020, the government completed the development of the national strategy using the Towards document as input, but mainly based upon federal priorities. This again then was a top-down component of the strategy. During this time, Statistics Canada consulted widely across the federal government using the strategy and the 31 ambitions as the foundation, and we finalized the SIF. This was considered a lateral component. In the end, was it top-down? Was it bottom-up? I would say it was a wonderful hurricane that came together to form the Canadian Indicator Framework. Our guiding principle was that we had to have data to be able to report. We didn't want to build a framework that could not be reported on. The challenge there is we needed to keep it tight, we needed to keep it relevant, and we needed to keep everyone happy. We continue to work on getting more disaggregated data published for vulnerable groups. And indeed, the Government of Canada has noted the importance of having more granular data to ensure evidence-based decision-making that takes into consideration inequities for various groups, such as region, gender, ethnicity, racialized populations, income level, or a combination of these and other categories to reveal important differences in their experience. And Statistics Canada continues to examine how we can provide policymakers with more and more of this granularity. Next slide, please. I want to illustrate a little bit about these ambitions that the Government of Canada put forward. Because the last 18 months have been so focused on health, I'll illustrate ambitions using Goal 3. So for Goal 3 in Canada, there are 3 Canadian ambitions. So you can think of these as sub-goals. Canadians adopt healthy behaviors, Canadians have healthy and satisfying lives, and Canada prevents causes of premature death. As I noted before, ambition is a sub-goal, is like a sub-goal. There are also targets, and these were all developed by policymakers. But not all indicators are associated with a specific target. So some indicators have no target at all, and that provides, as you can well imagine, its own challenges. So the national strategy in total has 31 ambitions that fall under 17 goals. And as I noted, this was the basis of the development for the indicators. Next slide, please. So what is the Canadian Indicator Framework? 31 ambitions and 76 indicators. Again, we ensured that there were data so we could report on every indicator, and so we could start immediately reporting. And some of the Canadian indicators are identical to the global indicators, so they're about 40% are the same. But there are some very concrete differences. For example, in Goal 1, we have the poverty measure, but we also have asset resilience. This is how Canadians could handle unexpected expenses or a loss of income for a certain amount of time. So it's 3 months or 6 months. Gives us a better sense of the financial stability of Canadians. Under Goal 2, we have food insecurity, as well as agricultural resilience measures, including soil erosion, the risk of water contamination from pesticides, chloroform, and other items. In Goal 3, there are indicators that map identically to the Global Indicator Framework, but we also have indicators related to the consumption of fruit and vegetables, perception of life satisfaction, overall well-being, and we have included indicators related to opioid overdoses and deaths, as there's an opioid crisis in Canada. I won't go through the entire framework, but highlight just a couple of other additions that are Canada-specific that help policymakers address specific issues. For instance, precarious employment is an issue in Canada, so we've included an indicator on the involuntary part-time rate to get a sense of the situation for precarious workers. We've also looked at jobs in the clean tech sector to find out how many jobs are related to sustainability. In Goal 9, we've added indicators on low carbon refueling and charging stations. And in Goal 11, the goal related to cities and communities, we've added sense of belonging to the community, as we feel this is important. Next slide, please. Where do we go from here? I think COVID-19 reinforced how important data are to policymakers. Additionally, it's also reiterated timeliness. So we continue to examine data sources to provide more disaggregation, because we know that national statistics mask the realities faced by vulnerable groups. We know that the experiences of Indigenous populations, recent immigrants, refugees, along with other vulnerable groups, is not the same as it is for many other Canadians. And this is one of the reasons Statistics Canada has embarked upon a data disaggregation action plan. The guiding principles for this are data and analysis should be disaggregated at the lowest level of population detail possible, while respecting quality and confidentiality. Analysis focuses on intersectionality, for example, young Black women, as opposed to just binary interactions. Statistics Canada's approved standards should be used for disaggregation across every program that we have, and data should always be available on our site at the lowest level of geography possible. As I noted, we are also developing progress measures that will enable Canadians to easily see if progress is being made towards the achievement of specific goals and indicators. We continue to form partnerships to better measure other indicators, such as green space. And we are building a quality assurance tool to assess non-official data sources that can be used in SDG reporting. In short, we have done a lot, but there's a lot more that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cara. And now I will do my presentation on Denmark, which is here. Okay, just a short note of introduction. My name is Niels Plog, and I'm the Director of Social Statistics, Statistics Denmark. I'm also responsible for our work with data and the SDGs. And that work has evolved a lot since we started some 4 years ago. It evolved in the sense that sustainability and the SDGs is playing an increasing role in the Danish society. In the Danish Parliament, which consists of 9 parties, parliamentarians from all 9 parties have created a cross-party group that are focusing on the SDGs and sustainability in relation to the development of legislation in Denmark. Now, this group of parliamentarians, they have created a panel of people from all kinds of the Danish society, labor unions, industrial organizations, consumer organizations, NGOs, academia, building societies, and also Statistics Denmark. And this panel is extremely active in promoting the knowledge of the SDGs, and actually also in creating data that are relevant also in a Danish context in relation to the SDGs. And I will return a little bit to that. On top of doing social statistics in Denmark and work with the SDGs, I together with Magic also try to be active in the UN group of experts on big data, where we are sharing a task team on big data and the SDGs, and I will also return a little bit to that later. Now, for us, it has been a challenge to cover the SDGs, but a challenge where we have had an outset that is kind of good. As I guess some of you know, we are basing a lot of our statistics on data from admin sources. We have very few surveys, and we have been able to cover also a lot of the SDG indicators based on information from admin sources. Some of it, most of it, with data that we already had in Statistics Denmark, and a lot of the rest of it with data that we will get from other government agencies in Denmark. The thing is that we have in the law of Statistics Denmark the right to ask for data from other government agencies if we need them as part of our statistical production, and we have used that right extensively in our work with the SDGs. So therefore, we were in a good situation when we started, but we are also challenged, and that challenge has to do with some of the focus areas of the SDGs, like for instance, people with disabilities. There we, on the one hand, lack, as is the case in other countries, a survey where people can report their situation in relation to being disabled or not. On the other hand, we do have statistics that are covering the group of people in Denmark that are receiving benefits either in kind or cash from the Danish welfare system based on on the fact that they have some kind of a disability. So we are not totally lost, but it has been a challenge for us. So at the moment we are covering 212 of the global indicators, the UN indicators, and we are working hard to cover all of them. Recently, the National Audit of Denmark did an audit of how government agencies worked with the SDGs, including Statistics Denmark. And the best grade that you can get from the audit organization is that what you're doing is satisfying. And they said that what we are doing in Denmark in relation to this in Statistics Denmark is satisfying. I think we ourselves will say that it's fantastic and excellent. but well, satisfying is an okay grade to get from the audit organization. Based on the fact that we already had a lot of data to draw on, we have not engaged in getting new and better data. But there are a few examples of areas where we have tried to get access to some kind of smart meter data, for instance, in relation to transportation and access to transportation in Denmark. There's a smart meter setup in Denmark that can be used for that, and we have kind of engaged in that. We have also engaged a bit in the use of geodata and satellite data in relation to issues of transportation and access to transportation, which is in general not a major issue in a country like Denmark, but even though it's not a major issue, it's something that we need to cover in relation to the SDG indicators. When it comes to the non-traditional data, we are not in any major sense using big data, but there has been a major project in Denmark which can be kind of put in under the heading of the citizen-generated data, because the panel that I mentioned in the beginning, the panel where all kind of interest groups in Denmark that are working with the SDGs, the panel that is set up by the group of parliamentarians, run a major project starting in the end of 2019 and into 2020. And the purpose of that major project was to get additional measuring points or indicators that could be of special interest for a Danish sustainability agenda. I guess it's no big secret that if you look at the issues that the SDGs are measuring, countries like Denmark and in general countries in Nordic countries like our neighboring countries, Sweden and Norway, and also Finland is doing quite well. So kind of the challenge that the panel tried to put forward was if we should try to come up with a set of indicators where we might not be doing so well as we are in the global indicators, how should those measuring points or indicators then look like? And this was a major project inviting basically everybody in Denmark who had a view on this, and we received more than 7,000 interventions in that. 7,000 is, well, Denmark is a small country, we are 5.8 million, but 7,000 interventions and shows some kind of engagement. And based on that, we have now on our website supplemented the global indicators with 197 national Danish measurement points that are related to the SDG framework and the 17 overarching goals for the SDG. So in that sense, we have had a major experience with citizen-generated data and the development of that. And we played as a statistical organization a key role in the development of that project. So now we are working, now that we basically have the data on the global indicators, and we do have those supplementary Danish measurement points, we are working on the visibility of the challenges relating to the follow-up on the Sustainable Development Goals, trying to show in broad terms to Danish society what kind of information they can get from using the data that we already have. And in relation to that, we have more recently received a lot of at least indirect support from the Danish government, because the Danish government launched in June its new national action plan in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the major points that was also mentioned yesterday when Parliament opened in Denmark was that all legislation in Denmark will now have to be SDG screened. So when a department put forward legislation for the Parliament for them to discuss and decide upon, that legislation should follow an SDG screening of the impact of the legislation in relation to the 17 SDGs and the 230 something or 40 something indicators. So we are expecting a lot of use of the data that we have now collected, because when the departments have to do that, one of the areas that they can get information on that is by using the things that we have been creating on that. So for us, it's still a very kind of interesting process. And one of the things that we have experienced is that there's actually a huge interest among stakeholders in the data situation. We have created a stakeholder group of people that have helped us with advice during the development for us of our platform, and it is now close to 100 people who show up 2 or 3 times a year at Statistics Denmark to give advice, and they kind of cover every part of society. And I guess as an SDG, you have a huge advantage in engaging in society based on the SDGs, because an NSO is maybe one of the few organizations in the country that have to take an interest in all of the indicators. We cannot neglect any of them. And therefore, everybody basically think that we are interesting, and it's basically interesting for us to talk to everybody. So also in relation to that, it's been a new experience for us and a very good experience for us in Denmark. Now, as I said, we also engaged in the group of experts on big data, and there will be a side event in relation to the Expo 2020 that is now taking place in Dubai on the 14th of December, where we will have a discussion on the use of non-traditional data for the coverage of SDG indicators. So stay tuned in relation to that, and hopefully you will also be able to join in 2 months' time when we are having this discussion. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to Indonesia, and Imam, could you please introduce yourself and then give us your presentation?
Okay, thank you very much, Niels. Let me share my screen first. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Imam Mahdi. This is very honored to be here to present the topic ensuring the data availability for the SDGs monitoring and evaluations. In this case, I will present on behalf of our chief statistician. So before I proceed with my presentation, please allow me to convey his apology being unable to deliver his speech today. And also, I would like to extend his warm regards to all participants. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the urgency of producing high-quality data, which are accurate, timely, and relevant to SDGs indicators. The data used for SDGs monitoring and evaluation are obtained from many different data sources, including from the Ministry of National Development Planning, also from BPS Statistics Indonesia, and also the data are obtained from other line ministries and government agencies. As for the BPS Statistics Indonesia, the data used for SDG indicators are produced from various censuses and surveys. Meanwhile, for other line ministries or government agencies, data are obtained from administrative records, measurements from clinical laboratories, and also from surveys. In order to ensure that the data for measuring SDGs indicator is covered completely, we conduct a mapping, kind of a mapping of the data availability to see if the data are available or not, and then which institution is actually responsible for providing the data for particular indicators. When SDGs data are available at the national level, we need to ensure that the SDGs data are globally comparable to other countries around the world so that we can measure the achievement of SDGs. In the meantime, when the SDGs data are available at the subnational levels, for example, like in the level of province and also districts, we also need to ensure the data quality produced by the local governments so that the SDGs data can accommodate and achieve the target for local governments and its regions. It is imperative that Statistics Indonesia shall keep improving the small area estimation techniques to provide more precise and reliable data for small areas. In the case of having no SDGs data available, there are a number of solutions that we can propose according to institutional responsibility. If the data is the responsibility of BPS Statistics Indonesia as the NSO, we can conduct one of these three alternatives. The first one, we could conduct a new survey, which of course is very costly. And secondly, we could embed questions onto the current existing surveys. And the third, we could also utilize the big data as the alternative. However, since big data requires such a high skill sets in methodology and technology, and also we need to consider the availability of the big data sources. On the other hand, if the SDGs data and availability is the responsibility of other institutions, they could also use their administrative data or conduct such activities that produce SDGs data for the purpose of SDG measurement. From the map that we can see the data availability, we see that ministry and government agency contribute to 175 indicators. Meanwhile, BPS will contribute to 71 indicators. And also BPS in collaboration with ministry contribute to 46 indicators. So in total, in this case, BPS Statistics Indonesia contribute to 117 SDGs indicators. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, when the SDGs data and availability is the responsibility of BPS, then we must make the right solution, either by inserting or embedding questions in the current surveys or conducting a new survey, as well as utilizing the big data. Example, in the embedding question in the current survey, for indicator 2.1.1, prevalence of undernourishment, we insert the questions in our national socio-economic survey. In this case, specifically, we put those questions in the consumption module. And similarly, for indicator 2.1.2, prevalence of moderate or severe food insecurity in the populations, we insert additional questions in the national socio-economic survey as well. And then we also conduct a new surveys. In this case, for example, like indicator 6.61, change in the extent of water-related ecosystem over time. We conducted the water quality survey in all provinces all over Indonesia. And then like indicator 4.2.1, the proportion of children aged 24 to 59 months of age. We conduct a survey, what we call the Early Child Development Index. This is the new survey that we conducted. And then also for indicators 2.3.1, which is related to the agriculture, we conducted what we call the Agriculture Integrated Survey. And then for the past several years, BPS has been utilizing big data as the new alternative for data sources. In this case, for example, like goal 2, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. We use the sample area framework to estimate harvested area using satellite imagery and mobile phone, as well as we use the artificial intelligence, in this case, machine learning. And then for the target 8.1, by 2030, devise an employment policy to promote sustainable tourism. We use the mobile phone data, in this case, for measuring the tourism statistics. And then for the target 10.7, facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policy. We use the MPD mobile phone data for human mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, as for the data obtained from line ministry, the types of data are varies from ministry to others to another. For example, like indicator 1.82, proportion of total government spending on essential services, we get the data from the Ministry of Finance. And then, for example, like indicator 1.5.1, number of deaths, missing persons, and directly affected persons attributed to disaster for 100,000 populations. In this case, we get the data from the National Disaster Management Agency. And prevalence of malnutrition among children under 5 years of age type, for example, here we obtain data from Ministry of Health. For the data which are unavailable at the line ministry, then it is their responsibility to provide the data, either by identifying the current activities, or they have to create a new surveys. In producing the data, they must comply with the Presidential Regulation number 39, year 2019 on Indonesia One Data. So in this case, the regulations set up the requirements that they have to satisfy some data standards, metadata, data interoperability, and also reference codes that they use. As stated in the regulations, in one Indonesia One Data initiative, BPS Statistics Indonesia is responsible for guiding the provision of sectoral statistics, which are produced by ministries and government agencies. Therefore, BPS established what we call the Data Forum as a means of communication platform between BPS and other ministries. In addition, also we conduct, facilitate a series of capacity building in statistics by means of distance learning and online courses to all government agencies, not only in the central government, but also to the local governments. It is our commitment to achieve one data and provide support for building the capacity to ministries and government agencies so that they can produce accurate, updated, integrated, and accountable data to be used for SDGs monitoring and evaluations. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude my presentation, I would like to underline that data provisions is unarguably inevitable for SDGs monitoring evaluations. The motto "Better Data, Better Lives" reminds us that ultimate aim of official statistics is to make better lives in many aspects, among other educations, health, gender equality, etc. During this, ability and quality of the data is getting urgently needed so that we can emerge stronger from this pandemic. Therefore, we must work together, provide the data SDGs indicators, especially the unavailable ones, by performing data innovations, by embedding questions in the current survey activities, for example. Also, we could conducting new surveys, utilizing big data, and implementing Indonesia One Data initiatives. Thank you very much for your attention. That's all, Niels.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. And last but not least, Mushini, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Niels. These have been really inspiring presentations, just listening to the NSOs and what's happening in the various countries. There's lots of lessons there that can be picked up by others. I was on the lookout for citizen-generated data, but I shall leave that for another time. So as you hear, my name is Mushiri Nyaga. I'm from the Local Development Research Institute. We're based in Nairobi, Kenya. We are primarily focused on supporting African Union member states to take practical evidence-informed actions to address hunger, poverty, and inequality. We have, in terms of our work, being part of a global network of hubs. So we are currently the Sub-Saharan Africa hub of the Data for Development Network. This is a network of hubs around the world working with governments and other partners to improve data availability, data use, data sharing, and of course the use of new technologies such as artificial intelligence to advance our development agenda. So I'm very excited to hear, Indonesia using machine learning for some of the indicators. That's interesting opportunities to network. So today I'd like to talk about the twin sectors of agriculture and nutrition, which are central for Goal 2. Transforming agriculture has been a priority for African countries for very many years, but has been hampered across time by three main factors. One, of course, is the low political will. Moving investments from what are considered high-value sectors like manufacturing, etc., can result in agriculture, the farm level extension services, access to technologies becoming hampered. An impact, of course, there can be seen in productivity. The second area, of course, is low investments. That has really been a problem. Many countries haven't achieved the target set at the African Union level of 10% of budget. And the third is poor data. The amount of data available to inform decisions for agriculture has not been good. So in 2014, the heads of state and government, the African Union heads of state and government met at the 2014 African Union Summit in Malabo, and issued a political declaration, provided a reinvigorated framework for the journey towards a continent that can feed itself. We were, I think, well on the way towards improved political will. Remember the three things. But part of this declaration also included commitments to improve investments in agriculture and brought back that target of bringing 10% of investment to the sector. So there's progress on that front, some push towards improving that money. And then there's a commitment to report on progress every 2 years. And of course, if you're going to report on progress, you're going to have to measure somehow. So these are the direct implications on data for agriculture. So we have targets, we have indicators in the SDGs, we have targets and indicators in the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, which is the framework that Africa is using for its agricultural transformation. So you're going to find that that mobilized more effort around making data available and supporting capacity in countries. Some development partners stepped in. Statistical agencies began to prioritize a little bit how they were working on their agriculture-related surveys and census. And I think we're still trying to figure out just how much progress we're making. But the reason I mention that is because there are two things that I'd want to highlight this morning. One is there is a need for regions and countries to find ways of crafting indicators that help address the real challenge on the ground, the real development challenge. Our development challenge is not the SDGs. They're a framework for delivery. So at the very base, at the local level, we need to figure out what it is that we need to get done, and then work our way towards how do we measure progress. And that's what I think Africa has demonstrated with CADEP, the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, domesticating indicators and targets that help move progress on ending hunger and addressing poverty, sustainable land management, etc. So there are targets there that you're going to find that are not high priority targets for most other countries around the world, right? Or some nuances to existing targets and indicators and SDGs that it make a lot more sense for us that probably might not make as much sense as a priority for many other areas. I'll give you an example. On the CADEP framework, we have a target to increase the area under cultivation, but that has to be disaggregated by priority value chains. And every region across the continent has different priority value chains. So the decision is left to countries to report on their 5 or so priority value chains. We have an indicator, a target to increase area under irrigation. Right, so irrigation is a major area in mechanization because of they need to reduce reliance on rain-fed agriculture. And that's part of our way of bringing resilience to our food production. If Africa is to feed itself, that's really going to be important. So some of those which are, have an impact on food security, have an impact on sustainable land and water management, might not translate into, say, in the US or Europe, but are really key for us. So there is a need. There is a need to figure that out. So once the framework was done, countries had to go out and get the job done. You have a biennial reporting mechanism for this framework. There's the SDGs, there's the Agenda 2063, a continental long-term vision and plan with its own implementation framework. How do you bring all of these together and make progress? And I think one of the opportunities that has been available to us is these new sources of data, these new technologies. So in the run-up to the SDGs, when we're still talking about them as the post-2015 agenda, there was this high-level panel report that talked about calling for a data revolution and focusing on new sources of data. And what we now have, and we're beginning to see even at the NSO level, is this outreach to figure out how do we use big data to get some of these things done? What are the sources of big data that really work for us? Thinking about Earth observation, for instance. So the headache that we had before of trying to estimate what the area under cultivation is becomes a little less, because instead of deploying human resource on the ground, we now have satellite data, satellite imagery that we can utilize, take machine learning, and be able to come up with better estimates, more accurate numbers for that. But the challenge is those are expensive. Imam mentioned the need for this skill set that is specialized and not as commonly found within our populations. But also the data sets themselves are not cheap. So LDCs will have a bigger challenge accessing that, than middle-income countries. And some way of helping bridge that gap is going to be an important thing over the next few years. So the ability of non-state actors to access these sources, of course, becomes a challenge. And those who are working on, say, supporting smallholder farmers need to figure out then how do we access this data? How do we make use of it? How do we move our communities forward? So you'll find, for that continental framework I mentioned, the Malabo Declaration, there's a biennial review report that's tabled before the heads of state. It's a peer review mechanism, a peer accountability mechanism. And the first two editions, there have been 2 editions so far, have had a recurring theme. And that theme has been, we need to improve the quality and availability of data for measuring our progress. So in some ways, I think we have better data, we have more data, more evidence, but it's not at the level that we still need it to be. It may be serving some of our high-level political purposes for measuring progress on these things, but still not enough for local actors to act. So in just 1 minute, talk about nutrition. Target 2.2, malnutrition, it's been mentioned a little bit, and specifically that indicator on 2.2.2 on prevalence of malnutrition. We've been working around the world at the level of the World Health Organization on trying to move the needle on this target of prevalence of wasting and stunting, especially those two another different targets in the framework. But for wasting, that's a very fast-moving event compared to stunting. So you cannot wait 5 years for a survey to be done in order to figure out, just how bad wasting is in your population. So we have surveillance mechanisms that are in place in countries. We have surveys that are done, but those surveillance mechanisms are trained on specific populations that are usually considered at risk. Then we had COVID. Now everyone is at risk. How do we get better data now so that we can respond to the issue of wasting in children under 5 within a shorter period, say 12 months, which is already too long anyway? You're going to find, looking at data, I'm looking at easily available data on stunting and wasting in children under 5. For wasting, across the continent, only 16 countries have more than 1 data point on wasting, on prevalence of wasting in the last 5 years. And that's partly because of the cost of getting this data. So do we have better evidence to act on wasting? I don't think so. It's not disaggregated enough. It's not timely enough. And these are areas where I'd like to see a greater focus within, for instance, the BAN network, clearing on financing for development data, the 50 by 2030 work being done by FAO and others, trying to advance that need to ramp up investments, make them more targetable, make the data more useful at the local level so that actors working there, national and state and non-state actors can get that job done. So thank you very much for the invitation to participate. I'm looking forward to seeing commitments out of the World Data Forum that help us get where we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Musin. Very important points about both the lack of data in some areas and also the usability of data at the local level. Actually, we are out of time, but if there is a question or comment from the participants in the room, I think we can take one or two. Maciek, you have to see if there's someone who wants to make an intervention. There's no one. Okay, but that's in terms of time, that's also fine. So thank you very much for the presentations. I enjoyed all of them, and as I said, we can in some way continue the discussion both locally, nationally, and also at the side event that we will have at the Expo 2020 on the 14th of December out of Dubai, where you are all very welcome. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and for some of you, enjoy the rest of your night. See you somewhere soon, I hope, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Niels.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.